The referee's whistle blows, signaling the end of 90 minutes. The score is tied, but the actual game of football is over. What begins now, in the span of the next 30 minutes of extra time, is no longer a test of tactics, formations, or strategy. It is a brutal, unforgiving war of human physiology. It is a battle of cellular survival, neuromuscular degradation, and psychological resilience. To truly understand the sheer magnitude of extra-time exhaustion, we must look past the sweat on the jersey and peer directly into the microscopic architecture of the human body. We have to examine the profound anatomical breakdown that occurs when elite athletes are forced to push their biological limits into absolute deficit. Let us begin at the cellular baseline. For the first 90 minutes, an elite football player covers anywhere from 10 to 12 kilometers. This requires a highly sophisticated shifting of metabolic pathways. The body relies heavily on oxidative phosphorylation, the aerobic energy system, to provide a steady stream of adenosine triphosphate, or ATP. The fuel for this process comes primarily from intramuscular glycogen stores and circulating blood glucose. But the human body can only store about 400 to 500 grams of glycogen in the skeletal muscles and another 100 grams in the liver. By the time the clock hits the 90th minute, these primary fuel tanks are catastrophically depleted. The skeletal muscles are running on fumes. When oxygen delivery can no longer match the extreme demands of the working tissues during continuous high-intensity sprints, the body forcefully shifts into anaerobic glycolysis. This is a faster pathway for generating ATP, but it is incredibly inefficient and comes with a toxic biological cost. The breakdown of glucose in the absence of adequate oxygen leads to the rapid accumulation of lactic acid. However, it is not the lactate itself that destroys muscle function. It is the sheer volume of hydrogen ions that are produced alongside it. This accumulation of hydrogen ions plunges the local pH environment of the muscle tissue into a state of metabolic acidosis. And this is where the microscopic machinery of the muscle begins to fail. Inside every muscle fiber are millions of contractile units called sarcomeres. For a muscle to contract, myosin filaments must reach out and bind to actin filaments, pulling them together in what is known as the sliding filament theory. This process is entirely dependent on the release of calcium ions from the sarcoplasmic reticulum. But metabolic acidosis severely blunts this process. The excess hydrogen ions competitively inhibit the calcium binding sites on the regulatory protein troponin. Simply put, the brain is screaming for the muscle to contract. The calcium is present, but the chemical environment is so acidic that the microscopic hooks inside the muscle fibers physically cannot grip each other. The muscle loses its ability to generate force. This is the physiological definition of peripheral fatigue. But peripheral fatigue is only one half of the equation. What is happening inside the central nervous system is equally devastating. As extra time drags on, the player enters the realm of central fatigue, a neurobiological phenomenon dictated by the brain's motor cortex and the spinal cord. The brain acts as a protective governor over the physical body. As core body temperature rises and metabolic byproducts flood the bloodstream, afferent sensory nerves send aggressive, high-priority warning signals back to the central nervous system. The brain interprets these signals as a threat to survival. In response, the motor cortex actively reduces the frequency and the amplitude of outgoing efferent signals to the working muscles. This means that action potentials, the electrical impulses required to trigger muscle movement, become weaker and fire less frequently. Furthermore, at the neuromuscular junction, where the nerve meets the muscle fiber, the supply of the neurotransmitter acetylcholine begins to deplete. The electrical signal from the brain physically struggles to cross the synaptic cleft. The athlete subjectively feels this as their legs turning to concrete. It is not just that the muscles are tired. It is that the neural drive required to activate them is being systematically shut down by a brain trying to prevent catastrophic biological failure. Because the central nervous system can no longer recruit the high-threshold fast-twitch motor units, the type 2A and type 2X muscle fibers responsible for explosive speed. The athlete's biomechanics fundamentally degenerate. The kinetic chain, which was a perfectly synchronized instrument in the first half, begins to unravel. We can physically observe this anatomical breakdown on the pitch. The player's center of gravity drastically drops. The crucial angles of hip flexion and knee extension become shallower and less dynamic. During a normal sprint, the ground reaction forces are absorbed by the powerful musculature of the quadriceps, the hamstrings, and the gluteus maximus. But in extra time, these muscles are failing. Consequently, the kinetic shock waves of every single foot strike bypass the exhausted muscles and are transferred directly into the passive structures of the body. The joints, the ligaments, and the connective tissue take the brunt of the impact. The patellar tendon, the Achilles tendon, and the vast fascial networks enveloping the legs undergo tremendous microscopic trauma. Every deceleration, every change of direction, and every landing forces the bones and joints to absorb loads they are not designed to handle without muscular support. This is where the clinical psychology and the deep neurochemical reservoirs of the human brain override the physical anatomy. In moments of extreme, high-stakes competition, such as a World Cup final, the brain initiates a massive sympathetic nervous system response. The adrenal glands dump profound amounts of epinephrine and norepinephrine directly into the bloodstream. Simultaneously, the brain's reward pathways, heavily modulated by dopamine, fixate entirely on the singular goal of victory.